Audio test 1 for the meeting stream.
Let's wait.
Audio test 2 for the meeting stream.
Check. Your integration. That was check 1, 2.
Audio test for the room.
Check 1, 2. Check, check, check.
Audio check.
I can confirm I heard audio on both YouTube and Zoom. Continued silence on meeting stream.
Audio test for the meeting stream. Audio test for the meeting stream.
Confirmed. Audio working on meeting stream.
Audio test for the meeting stream.
Confirmed. Audio working on meeting stream. Confirmed. Audio working on meeting stream. Confirmed. Audio working on meeting stream. Audio working on meeting.
Test for the audio stream.
Confirm audio stream. Confirm audio stream.
Audio test for the meeting stream.
All right, I think we are good to continue. So on item 6.1, we are going to hold that. What's that? We're going to hold 6.1 because there's a couple of questions. Item 7.1 is the approval to expropriate lands as part of the Bank Street Renewal Project. Is that carried? Carried. Okay, so let's go back to item 5.1 and we have a presentation for that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good morning, members of the committee. As I'm waiting for the presentation to come up, so myself and I'm joined with Joanne, our Chief Procurement Officer, to do a check-in and provide an update on the continued evolving world of tariffs. If you recall, we were before you back in the February timeframe when we released a memo in terms of the impacts that we were seeing at that juncture, if you will. In April, FinCorp, we provided a status update and where we were and some of the things that we were doing to mitigate these risks. And now today, and I'll continue to provide those updates as I committed as we go forward in the rest of the FinCorp meetings for the rest of the year. I'll provide those updates through the quarterly finance reports in terms of if there are financial impacts, and we'll also provide updates if there is risk in terms of potential projects from a non-financial side of the equation in terms of delays or construction efforts, et cetera. So you can move on to the next slide. So a little bit of background. The simplest thing of a tariff is the definition of a tariff. It's simply a tax. But that's the simple side of the equation. Where it gets complex is all the impacts that has on our supply chain. And you've heard me say before, and as we communicated before, the supply chain is a very, very integrated and complex ecosystem, if you will. And the impacts, are far-reaching depending on the good that we are purchasing. Joanne will go through some details in terms of unpacking where the majority next to all of our products are sourced from, mainly in Canada. You'll see that in the preceding slides. Some of the impacts will be ongoing and we don't know because the integration of the supply chain in terms of, something as simple as nuts and bolts that end up into a finished product could be taxed several times before that finished product is purchased. So even though we purchase, 99% of our purchasing is within Canada, it doesn't mean that 99% of our goods that we purchase are exclusively manufactured start to finish in Canada. So that's the complexities of the supply chain. Even when you look at it from an entity perspective and a corporation, a lot of these corporations are, incorporated in Canada, incorporated in the US. They have entities in Canada, which is a good thing because from an economic perspective, they obviously drive, the labor force and employ a lot of people within Canada. So even though a lot of our purchasing, again, is Canadian entities, those entities may have a presence in the US as well. But we'll unpack that in the next couple of slides. So you can proceed to the next slide. So one of the important components is, and you'll see this a lot on the next preceding slides, is, as I mentioned previously, 99% of our purchasing is within Canadian entities. Locally, that breaks down to about 91% for 2024. That tends to vary from that 90 to 94% year over year, depending on the purchasing. But overall, about 99% is purchased through Canadian entities. And a very small component is what we deem to be international outside of a Canadian entity. Again, that's in the context where, if I look at something like Microsoft, obviously Microsoft is a big purchase that we use from our software systems and perspective. They are a Canadian entity, but they're also a US entity. So in that kind of fashion, when we look at our core construction side of the equation in terms of our aggregates, steel, aluminum, a lot of that is mainly purchased and manufactured within Canada. Different components of steel could be sourced out of the US, but our main steel sourcing would be within Canada. And Joanna unpacked that a little further in terms of some of the other things that we're doing to kind of de-risk all this. So some of the key takeaways for today is, you'll see as we go through the presentation, we continue to work closely. Joanne continues to work closely with all departments. She's working very closely and her team with all entities outside in terms of the construction industry, the province, the federal level, really dialed into in terms of what is going on in the landscape outside of our own ecosystem at a macroeconomic perspective to all ensure that we can de-risk this as much as we can. And that's the lens that we'll be applying to these updates as we move forward, whether it's in the quarterly status updates or other mechanisms. We're really looking at it from a risk perspective in terms of if there's a risk, how can we work with the industry, the departments, the provincial, federal levels to de-risk and kind of mitigate those risks so we kind of continue to be, at the forefront of buying locally and more importantly, buying within Canada. So having said that, I'll go to the next slide and pass it over to Joanne.
Thanks. Today, I'm here to go over what the City of Ottawa is doing to mitigate tariff impacts on its procurement spend. I'll go into detail on each of these 5 items. Next slide, please. So City Council has already approved amendments to the procurement bylaw to ensure that Ottawa can be a strong consumer of local products, as you can see from our stats, where 99% of our procurements are issued to vendors with a Canadian presence. First, in 2021, the term sustainability was added to the definition of best value. Sustainability allows the city to take into consideration local community impact in the award of our contracts. Secondly, in January of 2025, this year, Council approved a new option to seek 3 quotes for purchases up to $125,000. This threshold was chosen to align with applicable trade treaties. It's worth noting that CUSMA, the Canadian-US-Mexico Trade Treaty, doesn't actually apply to municipalities, so that wasn't a consideration. This 3-quote process will promote local purchasing and staff familiarity with local supply chains, as one of the requirements of this process will be to seek a quote from a local supplier. It also aligns with the city's practices more closely with the Building Ontario Businesses Initiatives Act. This act does not apply to municipalities today, but Ottawa has elected to align our practices, given the intent is to prioritize local Ontario and Canadian spending. Next slide, please. We've also updated our standard procurement protocols to focus on de-risking supply chains and supporting local vendors. Every new competitive solicitation now includes the following language, and I quote, "The City of Ottawa is seeking to minimize tariff impacts associated to this or any related solicitation. This may include altering specifications to include products with increased Canadian content or non-tariffed alternatives. The City welcomes any questions or feedback from bidders which may assist the City in achieving the goal of reducing the negative impacts of tariffs on this solicitation." This clause invites the vendor community to offer alternative solutions to supply chain risks. A small but real-world example of this at work would be a recent contract that was awarded prior to the tariff discussions. This vendor was awarded a contract where a small portion of that contract included a piece of equipment that was only produced in the United States. After the introduction of tariffs, the vendor proactively approached the city with an alternative coming from Europe. This European alternative was evaluated by operations and was approved as an equivalent. This change to the contract will remove possible tariff impacts to the contract and avoid any increased costs. These small adjustments will serve to de-risk the city's contracts and minimize operational and financial impacts. Next slide, please. Next, the city has created supports and opportunities to collaborate internally. Examples of this work include an internal SharePoint site to support the new 3-quote process that Council approved this year. The site includes templates, instructions, and FAQs. The site ensures that staff seek quotes from at least one local vendor and all Canadian vendors wherever feasible. Secondly, an additional internal SharePoint site has been created and launched to centralize all tariff information available to staff. It is a quick way to ensure we are all working towards the same goal and we can share information quickly and easily about what is working well. We're also monitoring high impact agreements. Supply services, the end user client departments, and vendors of high impact agreements are ensuring we are communicating early and often and looking for creative solutions. Finally, we are actively seeking opportunities for interdepartmental collaboration. We are sharing information widely. A successful negotiation or a creative solution is shared widely to ensure the entire organization is thinking critically about this topic. Next slide, please. Next, the city has been doing regular industry engagement. We continue to meet with key local industry groups such as the National Capital Heavy Construction Association, the Association of the Ottawa Construction Association, and the Association of Consulting Engineers. Tariffs are a standing agenda item at these meetings where we discuss new opportunities and creative solutions to tariff impacts. We discuss risk allocation with a focus on minimizing operational and financial impacts. Through this engagement, we are looking to proactively design procurements to de-risk supply chains. Next slide, please. Finally, we have done a lot of work to engage with other public procurement bodies. We regularly engage with Supply Ontario. Yeah, if you go back a slide, please. The French one's correct. We've done a lot of work to engage with other public procurement bodies. We regularly engage with Supply Ontario, which is the province's procurement group. We also check in with what other provinces are doing. I'm on a weekly call with other municipalities within Ontario. This call focuses on sharing practical ideas that municipalities can implement. We are also keeping a close eye on what the federal government is doing, not only to its own procurement practices, but what they are also offering to support those affected by tariffs. This all aligns with the city's enterprise risk management framework. When we are evaluating each option, we consider administrative, operational, and financial impacts of each strategy. We implement these policies and procedures that are in the best interest of the City of Ottawa. For example, given 99% of our contracts are with vendors with a Canadian presence, the City of Ottawa simply does not contract directly with American suppliers very often, which is why our resources are focused on de-risking supply chains. Next slide, please. This last slide outlines some of the great work being done to support the local business community and Ottawa's residents. Ottawa.ca has a tariff toolkit. It explains the potential impact of tariffs and on supply chains and the local economy. It supports local and Canadian producers and businesses with links and resources. It also highlights the work City Council has done to address the current economic uncertainty. Ottawa also has launched a Shop Local by Canadian campaign that encourages residents and businesses to consider supporting local and Canadian goods and services. The logo for that campaign can be seen on the right side of the screen. Mayor Sutcliffe, together with the Mayor of Gatineau, have also issued a joint statement requesting the removal of interprovincial trade barriers. And finally, Mayor Sutcliffe has convened an economic council. That council is made up of different economic partners to share concerns, best practices, and resources with a view of mitigating local impacts. Supply Services has attended these meetings and shared our contact information to ensure we can continue to cultivate creative solutions to this evolving issue. Next slide. This concludes our presentation today.
Thank you very much for the presentation and for all the great work that you're doing in this area. Councillor Brockington.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for that update. It's very helpful and I appreciate it. It's very hard to keep track of what is tariffed and what isn't because it's changed so often. Do we know right now, even though we have 99% of our vendors that we contract with are Canadian, do we know indirectly the goods that they're using through contractors or builders? Like what is being tariffed right now that will impact the price of contracts going forward?
Mr. Mayor, that's a very complex question, and I'm going to try and keep it simple and not give you a complex answer. The reality is we are monitoring it daily, if you will. You can see through all the engagement that Joanne just outlined, it's very important for us to be connected to the industry because that way we have a first hand or a first link into what's happening on the ground floor, if you will. The challenge really comes down to is almost like a ripple impact when you drop a pebble or a boulder in a pond. Some of these things, when I started off talking to nuts and bolts, those are the things where we're the indirect consequences and impacts that may not hit until, 6, 8, 9 months down the road because of the way the supply chain works and the beast of the beast, right? So when you look at our core, main products like from an aggregate, asphalt, those things, those are locally, so those are less impacted today. They're not isolated. The reality is, if you go back to the nut and bolt example, by the time that triggers into a cost of a vehicle and the price of a vehicle goes up, then that ultimately got to bleed back to the product. The one thing we do notice or do know from previous historical data is on the aggregate side of the equation, those prices tend to be more correlated with fuel pricing. So fuel pricing right now is in a good state. But on the actual supply chain, again, is something that we're keeping a close hand on with industry and provincial and the federal level. So I don't have a clear answer, unfortunately, but that's kind of the dynamics of it.
No, I appreciate that and certainly understanding the complexity. The presentation mentioned that there could be financial assistance from the federal government. I think I heard a statement that for tariffs that the Canadian government would be collecting, there may be an opportunity to at least help some impacted industries. Have they mentioned anything about helping lower levels of government?
We're monitoring the situation closely and it could evolve, but right now we are aware that the federal government has announced relief for emergency protective groups. So we believe the police, fire, paramedic, possibly Ottawa Public Health and long-term care will see some relief. We're unpacking that right now and we're trying to determine whether it's the vendor that is going to see the relief or if the City of Ottawa will then pay the tariff and then bill the federal government. So we are keeping a very close eye on it.
Good, thank you so much. I just want to plug that AMO is hosting a tariff and trade symposium on June the 6th in Toronto. I would really encourage at least city staff to attend that, as well as members of council who are interested. And just again, to inform members that AMO also has a municipal finance and economic development task force, which is very engaged with tariff and trade, and Mayor Sutcliffe and I both serve on that task force. So you have representation there, but thank you for the presentation.
Thank you, Councillor Brockington. Councillor Menard?
Thank you very much, Mayor. Appreciate the presentation. It's helpful to get an overview. The 99% number, I want to make sure we're clear about it. It doesn't mean that 99% won't be affected by tariffs, even though we're procuring Canadian and as much as possible local. Their supply chains are affected individually. They might have something produced in the United States or need to order supplies from there. So that 99% isn't like a foolproof thing. Those are going to be affected too, those prices.
Mr. Mayor, absolutely, that is correct.
Okay, and then on the 1% international, I am curious what that is. Like, what are we seeing usually on that 1% piece?
Mr. Mayor, I can confirm that when we break that 1% down, 0.08% is actually American vendors. The remainder of that 1% are not American vendors. Of the 0.08%, we looked at each individual contract under that bucket. It was 5 contracts in 2024, and we looked at the award strategy, and I can confirm that there were no Canadian suppliers that were technically able to meet our requirements. So we did quite a deep dive in our 2024 data.
Oh, that's great. So, let's say less than 10% of that 1%, I guess, is US based. I know this is a bit harder to answer, but the biggest concern for the municipality as an organization, knowing the projects in the pipeline and what we do, like, is it a product? Is it steel? Is it aluminum? Is it asphalt? Is it our vehicle procurement? Like, I mean, where are we most concerned tariffs hurt the city of Ottawa as an organization? Obviously, our residents are going to feel it in multiple areas of their lives, but when it comes to the city of Ottawa as an organization, what is that? Is it housing construction? Like, what is it for us that we're involved in as for our multi-billion-dollar budget?
Mr. Mayor, again, a great question. I would say from a direct perspective, it's probably going to be on the vehicle side of the equation. Because when you look at what we directly buy from an aggregate perspective, less impact today. But where I see it majorly today, again, this can change tomorrow depending on what changes south of the border and what direction comes out of there. But today, what I'm seeing is probably that's the most exposure today. Again, because we're not in the business of buying large goods. Our fleet units are typically one of our largest type purchases. So that's where I would we're keeping a pulse on that.
Okay, yeah, and obviously our fleet, our transit, our any rolling stock, but this is the stuff that we got to be concerned with. Okay, in the future, will you be able to parse out the effect of tariffs? I imagine this will be difficult, but on individual projects. So going forward, if say, okay, we're doing a fleet renewal right now, right? That project's been impacted by tariffs. We're looking at a 10% increase from what we estimated. Let's say, will you be able to say that concretely, or give an estimate, or how will we know the effects to those sorts of projects?
Mr. Mayor, where we can, we will absolutely do that. I think it's going to be, as this unravels and evolves, I think we will probably start seeing, at a simplest term, if we get an invoice where that's simply 25% tariff there, that's easier. But as things evolve and it starts to get blended in terms of, again, I hate to use the nuts and the bolts, but the back and forth, you lose track of the impact. But where we will and where we can, we will report on that. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Menard. Councillor Tierney?
Great. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Great presentation. I think this is definitely on the forefront of people's minds with FCM and the work I've been doing. It's definitely the discussion amongst all of Canada, interprovincial trade barriers, something I'll highlight like Riley did with AMO. FCM will have their convention and there'll be workshops on that. Municipal leaders from across the country where they're talking specifically about that and our continued work and advocacy in the United States, as well as breaking down those interprovincial trade barriers, which is critical. And it's unfortunate there's 2 provinces holding out that are creating problems, but we'll keep working on them with our Prime Minister, I'm sure. I just wanted to check when it comes to things like when it comes to procurement, how right now we're looking obviously with the tariff situation in the States, do we actually look at trying to find a Canadian supplier of things before even going worldwide? Forget the United States for a minute. Just how aggressive are we on that? What do our rules look like that to support our own?
The City of Ottawa's procurement processes naturally favor Canadian vendors. All of our bids are received in Canadian funds. Our deliveries are inclusive of delivery fees and brokerage, which means a vendor has to have a physical presence in Canada in order to receive those goods and deal with brokerage services. So that speaks to the 99% of why it is logical that we are dealing with Canadian companies. On a larger scale, when you're looking at supply chains, there is quite a lot of freedom that we have, and we are looking for creative solutions. It's simply that sometimes there is no Canadian alternative, and we are having to look internationally as a result.
Certainly, and I only bring this up because I thought it's a good opportunity because procurement is its own monster. We never get involved as councillors, but let's make use of this opportunity to support our own support nationally, Canada. I think that's critical. And I just think of back with the speed board situation back in the day for our blinking speed boards. We went out to tender because we were buying so many speed boards for our communities, and we got these Parisian speed boards. And then we figured out we had to get new brackets for those Parisian speed boards because they didn't meet the old ones we were purchasing from Montreal. And I think we've resolved most of this since, but you can see where it gets to be a slippery slope when lowest bid is not always lowest bid. And as a matter of fact, I'd prefer to keep it Canadian and local. So just a quick comment, if you don't mind on that, if you see a situation like that, assuming it's not an outrageous cost, are those determinations made to say, you know what, it's probably easier if we keep it in Canada. We don't have to worry about shipping issues or all the problems or dealing overseas in different time zones to be able to get technical support. Is that heavily weighed? I'm just trying to understand how that's weighed right now.
Mr. Mayor, what I can say is, as Joanne highlighted, there are a couple of things that we've done. And I think one key important thing that we spoke about was the specification component, where if we do go out and there's a specification that kind of, I'll call it screens out a local, we have the ability for them to reach out to us so we can shift that a little bit so we screen them back in. So I think what we're doing is, we need to maintain the integrity of the procurement process for fairness and equitable and all that stuff. But what we're doing is we're removing all those EDB little small barriers for local to kind of get in and stay in. So these are the things where Joanne is working with the industry, and if things come up, they have an open dialogue. So, okay, is there a hurdle? How can we move that hurdle but maintain the efficacy of the program and make sure that local comes in? So a long way of saying yes, where we can shift the specifications to make sure that local is a proponent of the top pick.
And this is exactly what I was looking to hear, because of course the United States is the challenging, the problem child right now, but you can see internationally, even China is looking at reciprocal, like it's becoming an issue. And if we don't invest in ourselves, Canadian, we're going to run the risk of coming back here and doing this again with another country. So I'd like to hear that we're supporting local and Canadian. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tierney. Councillor King.
Thank you, Your Worship, and I'd like to thank staff for the very informative presentation. I think we are hearing it around the table, Councillor Tierney and others, that we appreciate the importance of procurement as a strategic tool for the city for economic development, environmental sustainability, and social inclusion. And it's excellent to note that we are investing locally. I mean, we spend, according to the report, over $2 billion on procurement. So it's important that 91% of that is with local vendors, and it demonstrates a commitment to Ottawa's economic development. Of course, social enterprise as well is hyper-local. And the report indicates only one new contract was awarded to social enterprise under the sole source rationale. So I'm just wondering if staff could speak to what barriers exist to increasing the number of contracts with social enterprises and how we can improve this in 2025.
Thank you, Mayor. The city's procurement team has developed many resources and tools to enable social procurement. We have sole sourced to social enterprises, and this discussion around this table has really motivated all of our clients to really ensure that we are focused on local. And so what we are doing is ensuring that all of our client departments internally within the City of Ottawa are aware of the ability to sole source directly to social enterprises and work closely with the social enterprises groups within the City of Ottawa, throughout the City of Ottawa, to ensure that we are aware of what they're selling and can match them up with the departments that are interested in buying what they are selling.
I appreciate those efforts. I know that Cyril, as well as Joseph, joined us at the Black Business Expo, where there were also a number of social enterprises who are engaged and are seeking contracts with the city. And I think it's important for us to continue to make those connections. You know, I am concerned that we have seen limited contract awarded to social enterprises, despite the bylaw amendment that I know many around this table worked on. I believe Councillor Dudas actually championed in 2021. You know, we want to ensure that if, especially in perilous economic times, challenging economic times, that if there are greater opportunities for us to assist local social enterprises, especially from diverse communities, that we continue to work hard to achieve that. I know that there are efforts underway, and we want to just continue to encourage and determine if there are ways that we can enhance outreach to those communities. But I really thank you for that work. And, you know, I'll continue to ask those questions because the community continues to ask those questions about how they can access those opportunities. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor King. Councillor Leeper.
Thank you very much, Mayor, and thank you very much to staff for the presentation. It is helpful. I appreciate hearing about all the efforts that have taken place thus far. You've worked with speed and nimbleness, and that's greatly appreciated by councillors. I'm grateful for the efforts that the mayor has put into ensuring that there's a table at which a bunch of different stakeholders across the city are able to share their experiences of tariffs. What I haven't heard yet, and I suspect it's going to be complex to put together, is the financial impact on the City of Ottawa from tariffs. As we look forward to our 2026 budget, or 27 or 28 budget, how much is this going to cost us? Are we any closer to figuring out whether this is millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars? Is that work that is ongoing? And what are the timelines in terms of being able to get back to us with some understanding of the impact?
So, Mr. Mayor, that work is ongoing, and it will be continuously ongoing until there's a resolution on the old tariff issue. What I can say is that we're finalizing the Q1 report, which will be back at FinCorp in June. Okay. At the high level, again, we haven't did a deep dive review yet of all the Q1 actuals. We're not seeing a big impact just yet. Keep in mind, you know, our construction industry starts to ramp up in April timeframe. So as we're going through the procurement process now on those contracts for this year's construction, we'll get a better insight in terms of if there's any impacts flowing through there. But all that to say, it's on the pulse, and as we know and information comes, that will be reported and captured as part of our quarterly status reports. again, June for Q1, September for Q2, then we're into the budget, so that'd be in the directions as well. So we're committed to ensuring that we will be highlighting that where there's impacts that we know. Where we don't know, that will be a risk that, again, that we will highlight from a risk management perspective in terms of those impacts as we look ahead.
Okay. I just want to make sure that as we go into the 2026 budget process, that we start to have a good understanding of what kind of pressure this is going to put on us, because we've got some choices to make in December. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you. Councillor Desroches.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. It's interesting that this report's coming forward today. We know that our Prime Minister is in Washington, and I'm sure all Canadians join me in wishing him the best there, and under some very difficult circumstances to stand up for Canada. That said, we also have an Ottawa area MP who happens to be the Prime Minister, who I think will be interested on the impact of this trade war on Ottawa residents, and in particular the city of Ottawa. These are tariffs, of course, that we've imposed on imports, and these are decisions of the federal government. And so I think they've been trying to be sensitive to not further disable the economy by being strategic in the application of these retaliatory import tariffs. Can the Treasurer tell us how we're able to document the impact of these tariffs, so that when we are, and the Mayor is talking to the Prime Minister, he can explain and show, I think, in a tangible way what the impacts are for Ottawa?
Mr. Mayor, yes, so that's what we'll be doing. You know, where we can, in some cases, it might be easier. Like as we see the procurement contracts come back in for this upcoming construction season, we'll definitely flush that out and kind of create a log of that. Where we see on other, I'll call it routine goods purchasing, like our fleet, we'll definitely start to log that and track that. So we are watching it closely, and we are going to be tracking that again, as I stated, from a Q1, Q2 perspective in our financial reports. And then as we look forward in terms of the risk mitigations, in terms of the ongoing impacts that it may have.
Good. Thank you very much, because I think, again, it will be important to share that with the Prime Minister and our local MP to understand, the impact on the community he represents and his caucus colleagues. Can you just take me through some scenarios on a standing offers situation where we would have a standing offer in place, and we would get a quote from a vendor, and it would be perhaps not a Canadian good, or it'd be a tariffed good? What options do we have there to try and pivot over to a Canadian or non-US product or service in the case of a standing offer?
Mr. Mayor, thank you for the question. It would depend on what alternatives exist. And so if a standing offer exists and it's for goods, and we've inadvertently specified an American product, and we are doing business with a Canadian company selling us an American product, we can approach that Canadian company and seek alternatives that are both meet our operational requirements and our financial needs. So we have a lot of flexibility when it comes to standing offers to negotiate with our vendor community. And oftentimes we are seeing, because we have such a high volume of Canadian vendors, we are seeing Canadian vendors approach the city and offering alternatives that they are finding for us. And so that's what we're doing on a case-by-case basis. Where we can, we are moving away from goods and services that are subject to tariffs.
Yeah, that's good, because that's what I hear from some constituents that are in the business sector, that they're pivoting, that they might have been sourcing a good from the United States, and they're pivoting to find other countries that are competitive in terms of price. And the reality is, many times it's Chinese, and that's kind of the situation that we're in, unfortunately. On that same question, how do you avoid situations, which I hope would be rare, of profiteering, where someone would raise a price, a supplier, and then claim there's duties and not be able to substantiate that the country of good is from the country of origin is from the United States?
Anytime a contract amendment is required, the end user department approaches supply services and we help negotiate that contract amendment. We are not approving tariff increases without proof for those deliveries. We are looking at what they originally received for quotes, what the new information is. So there is quite a lot of scrutiny that goes into, because agreed, we are concerned around opportunistic behavior, and we are taking great lengths and time to ensure that we are negotiating closely with our vendors, our partners, to ensure that we are covering their costs appropriately, and we are not covering costs that were never incurred in the first place.
Okay, good. I like the answer that you gave, and I guess I'll be a little more clear is to some vendors, don't rip off the city of Ottawa because of this, terrible situation we're in, and that you're going to be watching it very closely with respect to any contract amendments that they're appropriate and that there's legitimate cases of tariffs. Last question is on just development charge review. We just undertook it. Obviously, there's cost assumptions there. Is there a need to go back and look at kind of some of the cost assumptions that we did as a result of the development charges? Because we know we've got an entire program of roads and bridges and transit infrastructure and buildings that are coming forward. What's the situation there, Treasurer, in terms of our assumptions on what we see as costs for our major infrastructure projects over the next decade?
Mr. Mayor, typically what our practice is we track that again. So we'll be tracking that, and that'll lead into the existing DC background. And then we kind of keep that log when we come back with the refresh. So as we see, we always kind of capture what the estimated cost is for that piece of infrastructure, if you will. And if that changes, then we, in the next DC update, we can always make updates then to capture the price escalation or the changes in estimates based on those factors.
Okay, thank you. That's all for me, Mr. Mayor. Appreciate it. Merci.
Thank you, Councillor Desroches. Okay, thank you again for the presentation. Is that item received? Thank you. Moving to item 6.1. So we do have a motion from Vice Chair Kitts. Maybe we can introduce that and then move to questions.
Great, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will read it in and then just provide a brief comment. Whereas on November 13th, 2014, as part of its deliberations on the 2025-2029 City of Ottawa Municipal Accessibility Plan, City Council directed staff to explore options to improve the availability of information regarding accessibility features in city parks for residents and visitors. And whereas, as part of the 2025 update to provincial and federal accessibility plans, staff have provided a detailed response to Council's direction, including an overview of current initiatives to improve accessibility in parks, the results of an online resident survey on accessible park amenity information, current availability of accessible park amenity information, and opportunities to improve related information for residents and visitors through a multi-year phase plan. And whereas these opportunities are not currently listed in Document 1, titled 2025-2029 City of Ottawa Municipal Accessibility Plan Initiatives, and whereas adding an initiative to collect, validate, and publicize accessible park amenity information would address an important priority for many families, including those with children and caregivers with disabilities, therefore be it resolved that staff be directed to add an initiative to Document 1, 2025-2029 City of Ottawa Municipal Accessibility Plan Initiatives to improve the availability of information regarding accessibility features in city parks for residents and visitors as described in the report, and be it further resolved that staff continue to provide updates to Council on the progress of this initiative through annual updates to the COMAP. So again, just for context, inclusive play is very important to my community and to me. You may remember I had a motion a couple months ago that asked staff to explore the feasibility of creating or mapping our accessible play features throughout the city, having been inspired by a similar mapping exercise in a different city. And I have to say that the team that was tasked with this have really gone above and beyond. Katie, Megan, and Tyler have ran with the idea, and I'm very inspired by their enthusiasm. So this motion is really just asking us to formalize that it will be included on their work plan going forward. And at this time, there's no they can do that within the current budget envelope. There's no additional ask. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Kitts. Councillor Brockington.
Thanks, Mayor. I have no questions related to the Kitts motion. I think it's reasonable and good, and I will be supporting that. I have a question regarding the accessibility report from OC Transpo, and if I may ask a few questions in that regard. The accessibility lens that's used in decision making, can staff just elaborate on whether that definition expands on passengers? There's the mobility challenges lens, but I just want to know, does that include other passengers or other cohorts of people who are not necessarily described as people who have mobility challenges?
Mr. Mayor, thank you for the question. I have many colleagues with me that can help me. I think the most important thing is to think about how transit can be accessible for everyone, not only people with disabilities. It's, people, pregnant people, and so elderly people, kids, etc. So it's accessible for everyone. And I would even go more largely accessible. It's not only related to how we access to transit and how much we pay. Is it accessible for low tax, low and people who don't have good revenues, those kind of things. So it's very, very large.
I appreciate that response. That's helpful. I read in your report that before Line 2 reopened, you hosted a familiarization session with people in the disability community. This is per your report, 8 people showed up. And I think that was very important, and I appreciate that. But what I'm getting at is, and I think the word I'll use is functionality. I heard Madame Amicar talk about accessibility as well, but for example, before you open Line 2, when you're considering various features in a train carriage or a bus or a paratranspo vehicle, do you invite people, in addition to people who are in various disability community organizations, to talk about that? Did you invite people to come into stations or to try the trains? I'm just thinking a young parent with multiple kids pushing a baby carriage, it would be good to assess the functionality of stations, the functionality of carriages, to make sure there are no impediments for people to get on and off trains or stations. How does OC Transpo do this type of testing in advance of new vehicles or when stations are under construction?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for the question. So we have multiple things that we do. A good example, we just received the 6-meter power buses. So we invited customers to come and try. And even before we purchased those vehicles, so we contacted them to make sure that we address everything. The other thing as well, we have advisory group that we meet on a regular basis with the people, so they can provide some suggestions, etc., etc. And on top of that, with the safety management system that we have in place, we must simulate our operations. And we normally, have actors with the wheelchair. But a couple of months ago, I spoke with my folks and I said, we will need to bring real people so we can sit in a real time and with the real needs instead of simulating it. So those kind of initiatives are in place at OC Transpo, and we are welcome to receive any other suggestions that you may have.
Fair enough. I appreciate that, and I appreciate your answers today. Thanks, Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Brockington. On the motion from Vice Chair Kitts, then, is that carried? And the item is amended. Is that carried? All right, we will move in camera now for our cybersecurity update. I'll ask Vice Chair Kitts to read the motion to move in camera.
Be it resolved that the Finance and Corporate Services Committee resolve in camera pursuant to subsection 13(1)A of the procedure bylaw as the subject matter relates to the security of the property of the city to receive a presentation on cybersecurity and the external threat landscape, which is confidential and will not be reported out.
Is that carried? All right, we will move in camera and resume as soon as possible. Thank you. Check, check, check. Check, check, check. We are going to start again in 1 minute. All right, we'll resume. And for the benefit of those joining us online, the Finance and Corporate Services Committee just met in camera in order to receive an update on cybersecurity and the external threat landscape. These matters will not be reported out as they relate to subsection 13(1)(a) of the procedure bylaw, being the security of the property of the city. During the in-camera session, no votes were taken other than procedural motions and/or directions to staff. All right, I'll note the information previously distributed on the agenda. Are there any notices of motion? Are there any inquiries? Any other business? Motion to adjourn? Thank you, everyone.